In early 2025, President Donald Trump escalated his rhetoric toward U.S.-Canada relations, repeatedly emphasizing that the United States does not need Canadian resources. He even suggested that Canada should consider becoming the 51st U.S. state, framing it as a possible solution to ongoing trade disputes. Trump called Canada a tariff abuser and declared, "We don't need your cars, we don't need your lumber, we don't need your energy, and very soon you will find that out." Echoing this sentiment in another statement, he said, "We don't need energy from Canada, we don't need lumber from Canada, we don't need anything from Canada. I believe this will be the golden age of America." In a post on his social media platform, Trump further described Canada as a pointless tariff abuser, claiming that any money lost to Canadian tariffs would be recouped through reciprocal measures. As tensions rose, Trump proposed that Canada could avoid future U.S. tariffs by joining the United States as its 51st state, a move he suggested would resolve trade conflicts and bring economic benefits to Canadians. Escalating the trade standoff, President Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on Canadian imports, including a 25% levy on autos, steel, and aluminum, further deepening the strain in cross-border relations. In direct response to Trump's aggressive trade stance, Canada is fast-tracking the expansion of LNG Canada, its largest private sector energy project located on the West Coast. The federal government now considers the project's second phase both likely and of national significance, with plans to double its capacity to 28 million metric tons per year. This bold initiative highlights Canada's commitment to diversifying trade partnerships and reducing economic dependence on an increasingly adversarial U.S. administration. The LNG Canada Consortium, which includes industry giants Shell plc and Petronas, is expected to begin liquefied natural gas shipments within months. Its planned expansion serves as a pointed rebuttal to Trump's tariff strategy, demonstrating the ineffectiveness of protectionist policies in coercing trade partners. Instead, such tactics have spurred countries like Canada to pursue alternative markets and assert greater economic sovereignty. Beyond LNG Canada, the federal government is advancing other West Coast initiatives, including Cedar LNG and Woodfibre LNG. Collectively, these projects could position Canada as the world's fifth-largest LNG exporter, enabling the country to redirect up to half of its natural gas exports, currently sent almost exclusively to the United States, to new markets. This strategic pivot underscores the unintended consequences of Trump's trade policies, which have diminished U.S. influence and encouraged nations to strengthen their economic independence. Trump's tariff barrage and threats of economic force have not only fueled political tensions but also accelerated Canada's pursuit of new trade alliances and diversified markets. These unintended consequences highlight the failure of coercive trade tactics, which have backfired by undermining U.S. standing while empowering its economic partners. Projects like the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion are now being prioritized to enhance oil export capacity to non-U.S. markets, reflecting a growing determination to insulate the economy from the volatility of American trade policy. In the wake of geopolitical tensions and the subsequent reduction of Russian natural gas supplies, Europe has been compelled to seek alternative energy sources to meet its substantial demand. This shift presents both opportunities and challenges, particularly concerning Canada's potential role as a liquefied natural gas (LNG) supplier and the implications for U.S. energy exports. The European Union's reliance on Russian natural gas has significantly decreased, dropping from 45% of imports in 2021 to 15% by 2023. This decline is part of the EU's REPowerEU initiative, aiming to eliminate dependence on Russian fossil fuels by 2030. To compensate for the reduced Russian supply, Europe has turned to the global LNG market, leading to a 37% increase in LNG imports in 2024 compared to the 2019 to 2021 average. Despite these efforts, Europe faces ongoing challenges in meeting its energy needs. As of April 2025, European gas storage levels have fallen to just under 34% capacity. To reach the European Commission's target of 90% capacity by November 1, an additional 57.7 billion cubic meters of gas are required. equating to approximately 250 LNG cargoes and an estimated cost of $11 billion. Canada, with its vast natural gas. Canada's natural gas reserves are well positioned to support Europe's energy diversification efforts. Historically a reliable exporter of natural gas, Canada has been the world's second-largest exporter, following Russia. Developing LNG export facilities on Canada's east coast could offer a direct and secure supply route to European markets. However, Canada's LNG export potential is currently limited by infrastructure constraints. Most existing facilities are on the west coast and primarily serve Asian markets. Establishing LNG terminals on the East Coast would require significant time and investment but could ultimately make Canada a key contributor to Europe's energy sector. The United States has rapidly increased its LNG export capacity and has become a major supplier to Europe. In the first 4 months of 2022, U.S. LNG exports to the EU and UK more than tripled compared to the previous year, with 74% of exports directed to Europe during that time. This surge helped compensate for reduced Russian supply and strengthened energy ties between the US and Europe. However, increased competition from Canadian LNG could affect the US market share in Europe. While both countries aim to support European energy security, Canada's emergence as an LNG supplier could alter trade dynamics. US LNG projects also face challenges such as construction delays and cost overruns, partly due to tariffs on imported materials like steel and aluminum, which can make up to 30% of the cost of building LNG export facilities. Diversifying Europe's energy imports is a strategic priority to enhance security and reduce dependence on any single supplier. Canada's potential entry into the European LNG market could provide a stable and friendly source of energy in line with Europe's long-term goals. However, to realize this potential, Canada must overcome infrastructure challenges and align its policies to encourage investment. For the United States, staying competitive in the European LNG market requires addressing domestic issues such as infrastructure development and trade policies that affect project costs. North American collaboration could also be explored to present a reliable and unified energy supply approach to Europe, in response to increasing economic pressure from Washington. A large majority of Canadians now support building a cross-country oil pipeline that would bypass the United States. This reflects a strong rejection of then-President Trump's trade tactics. A Bloomberg-commissioned poll by Nanos Research showed that 77% of Canadians either support or somewhat support federal funding for a pipeline from Alberta's oil sands to the eastern provinces. Such a project would allow crude oil to be refined and exported without relying on U.S. infrastructure, marking a significant shift in Canada's energy policy aimed at reducing dependence on a now less cooperative trading partner. This perspective grew stronger as the Trump administration expanded tariffs globally, targeting foreign automobiles and maintaining tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Canadian oil. A 25% tax on most Canadian goods and a 10% tariff on Canadian oil impacted the Canadian economy and led to greater calls for national self-reliance. Though these tariffs are currently suspended under USMCA provisions, they remain legally active and could be reinstated. Trump also suggested additional tariffs on Canadian lumber and made provocative comments about Canada's sovereignty, suggesting it could become the 51st U.S. state. In Quebec, once a key obstacle to cross-country pipeline development, around 60% of people now support such a project. The provincial government has shown increased openness, reflecting a significant political change in response to U.S. economic pressure. The Energy East pipeline, originally proposed by TC Energy but cancelled in 2017 due to political opposition in Quebec, may be reconsidered in this new context. With growing national support for energy independence, reviving the project may now be possible. The federally funded expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline under Prime Minister Trudeau's government demonstrated that Ottawa is willing to invest heavily in strategic energy infrastructure, particularly when national sovereignty and market access are involved. Canada's move to reduce reliance on the U.S. is about more than just oil. It is part of a broader effort to become less dependent on a neighboring country that has increasingly acted as an economic rival. Currently, most of Canada's crude oil flows south through pipelines that also serve eastern refineries, many of which cross U.S. territory. This creates exposure to external economic decisions, become a significant liability in an increasingly unstable trade environment. The Nanos poll, conducted between March 29 and April 1 among 154 Canadians, highlights a broader political shift. Canada is reclaiming control over its resources and markets in response to sustained economic pressure from the United States. At the same time, fiscal concerns remain prominent, with the federal budget deficit projected to reach 48 billion Canadian dollars. The April 28 election has both Prime Minister Mark Carney and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre proposing major fiscal reforms. Yet, in the face of economic uncertainty, energy sovereignty may become the most unifying issue of all. Canada remains a global energy leader, supported by a varied and abundant resource base that fuels domestic consumption and enables substantial international exports. The energy sector not only powers Canada's economy but also strengthens its geopolitical role, especially in North America. As of 2021, Canada's total installed electricity generation capacity was approximately 149 gigawatts, with projections suggesting growth to 170 gigawatts by 2035. This growth is expected to be driven by modernization projects such as the Canada Small Modular Reactor Roadmap, which aims to diversify and secure the country's energy infrastructure. In 2022, Canada generated around 640.3 terawatt-hours of electricity, a 2% increase from the previous year, indicating steady growth in demand and capacity. The country's electricity mix is relatively clean and balanced. Hydroelectricity remained dominant at 58%, followed by nuclear at 14.3%, wind at 6%, natural gas at 13.6%, and coal at 4.3%. In addition to renewables, Canada continues to be a top global producer of fossil fuels. In 2023, it produced 277.9 million tons of crude oil, representing 6.2% of global production and ranking fourth worldwide. Natural gas production reached 190.3 billion cubic meters, or 4.7% of global supply, placing Canada fifth globally. These production levels support strong export activity. In 2023, Canada's energy exports totaled $199.1 billion, equivalent to 10.3% of its nominal GDP. Crude oil led with exports of 3.9 million barrels per day, 97% of which went to the United States, valued at $130 billion. Natural gas exports, entirely to the United States, generated $13 billion, while electricity exports brought in $4.3 billion. This heavy reliance on the United States as Canada's main energy customer. Nearly all oil and gas exports and 85% of electricity exports has historically been mutually beneficial. However, it is increasingly seen as a strategic risk due to changing trade dynamics and growing geopolitical tensions. In response, Canada is actively working to diversify its energy export markets. Although the United States remains the primary destination, about 3% of crude oil exports in 2023 were sent to other international markets, including the Netherlands, United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, France, Norway, Italy, and Hong Kong. These new trade relationships reflect a shared understanding of the need to reduce dependence on any single market, especially one subject to political uncertainty. The introduction of broad tariffs by President Donald Trump marked a turning point in Canada-US relations. In response, Canada has accelerated efforts to diversify not only its trade relationships but also its strategic and technological partnerships, ranging from energy and agriculture to defense and digital infrastructure. A broader initiative is underway to lessen reliance on the United States and pursue a more independent direction. Nowhere is this change more evident than in Canada's energy sector. Historically, Canada has exported nearly all of its crude oil and natural gas to the United States. The two countries have had a closely connected energy relationship for decades. In 2023 alone, 97% of Canada's